My name is Serena Walsh, I am 26 years old, and 3 months ago I discovered my parents had destroyed my financial future before I even knew it existed. What started as a routine credit check for my first home purchase became the moment I learned that unconditional family love was apparently very conditional after all. The $45,000 loan they took out in my name when I was 17 was just the beginning of a betrayal so deep it would fracture everything I thought I knew about blood loyalty forever. Hey everyone! Before we dive into this wild family drama that honestly sounds like it came straight out of a nightmare, I want to know, where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below. If you are ready for a story about family betrayal that will make you question everything you thought you knew about trust, smash that like button and hit subscribe because this journey is about to get absolutely insane. Trust me, you will want to stick around for the plot twist that nobody saw coming. The morning everything changed started like any other Tuesday in September. I had been working as a marketing coordinator at a small tech startup in Portland for 2 years, finally feeling like I had my life together. My boyfriend Marcus and I had been talking about moving in together, maybe even buying a small condo. I was excited, nervous, but ready to take that next step into real adulthood. I remember sitting in the loan officer's chair at First National Bank, wearing my best blazer and clutching all my financial documents. Sarah, the loan officer, had been so friendly on the phone when I scheduled the appointment. She seemed genuinely excited to help a young professional get her first mortgage. The pre-approval process should have been straightforward. I had steady income, decent savings, and I had always been careful with money. That careful nature came from growing up in a household where money was always tight. My parents, Robert and Linda Walsh, had raised me and my younger brother Kevin in a modest 3-bedroom house in suburban Ohio. Dad worked construction when he could find steady work, and Mom cleaned houses for wealthy families across town. They always emphasized the importance of education and financial responsibility. They paid for my college tuition through a combination of their savings, my part-time job income, and what they said were small loans they were happy to take on for my future. I trusted them completely. They were my parents, after all. Sarah pulled up my credit report on her computer screen, and I watched her expression change from professional friendliness to confused concern. She frowned, scrolled down, then looked at me with what I can only describe as pity mixed with suspicion. "Miss Walsh," she said carefully, "I need to ask you about some items on your credit report. Are you aware of the outstanding loan balance you currently carry?" My stomach dropped. Outstanding balance? What are you talking about? I do not have any loans. I paid off my student loans last year, and I only have one credit card that I pay off every month. Sarah turned her monitor toward me, and there it was in black and white, a $45,000 personal loan taken out in my name 3 years earlier. The payment history showed it had been current for the first 2 years, but for the past 8 months, it had been marked as severely delinquent. My credit score had plummeted to the low 500s. The room started spinning. I stared at the screen, reading my own name and social security number attached to a massive debt I had never agreed to take on. The loan had been taken out just 2 months before my 18th birthday, which meant someone had forged my signature as a minor. "There has to be some mistake," I whispered, but even as I said it, a horrible realization was creeping into my consciousness. My parents had access to all my personal information. They had helped me apply for college, for student loans, for my first credit card to build credit history. They knew my social security number, my date of birth, everything someone would need to apply for a loan in my name. Sarah printed out the detailed credit report and handed it to me with genuine sympathy in her eyes. "I am so sorry, Miss Walsh. This appears to be a case of identity theft. You will need to file a police report and dispute this with the credit bureaus immediately. Unfortunately, until this is resolved, we cannot proceed with your mortgage application." I drove home in a daze, the credit report burning like acid in my passenger seat. I kept trying to come up with innocent explanations. Maybe someone had stolen my information. Maybe it was a clerical error. Maybe there was another Serena Walsh born on the same day in the same state. But deep down, I already knew the truth. That evening, I called my parents. Dad answered the phone with his usual cheerful greeting, asking about my day and whether I had heard back about the house yet. His normalcy felt like a slap in the face. "Dad," I said, my voice shaking, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Do you know anything about a $45,000 loan in my name?" The silence on the other end of the line lasted an eternity. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, defensive, guilty. "Serena, sweetheart, we can explain everything. Your mother and we had some unexpected expenses when you were in college. Medical bills from when your grandmother was sick, and the roof needed emergency repairs. We were going to lose the house. We only used your name because your credit was clean, and we knew we would pay it back before you ever needed to know about it." The casual way he said it, like using my identity was a reasonable solution to their financial problems, made my blood run cold. Before I needed to know about it? "Dad, this has destroyed my credit. I cannot buy a house. I cannot get approved for anything. And you have not been making payments." We hit some rough patches. Mom's voice came through the speaker. She had been listening the whole time. "Your father's work has been inconsistent, and we had to prioritize keeping our own house. But we have been meaning to talk to you about this anyway. We think it is time for you to start giving back to the family that invested so much in your education and success. Give back." As if stealing my identity and ruining my financial future was an investment they expected returns on. "You want me to pay for a loan I never agreed to take?" I asked, incredulous. "We prefer to think of it as helping family in a time of need," Dad said. "You have a good job now, and we sacrificed a lot to get you through college. This is your opportunity to show gratitude for everything we have done for you." I hung up the phone and sat in my empty apartment, staring at the credit report that had turned my world upside down. The people who were supposed to protect me, who had raised me to value honesty and responsibility, had been lying to my face for years. They had stolen from me, destroyed my financial future, and now they expected me to thank them for it. That night, I made 2 decisions that would change everything. First, I was going to file a police report for identity theft. Second, I was going to make sure my parents faced consequences for what they had done. The naive daughter who trusted blindly was gone forever. In her place was someone who understood that sometimes family is the enemy wearing the most convincing mask. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I had never experienced before. The initial shock and emotional devastation had crystallized into something much more dangerous: cold, calculated anger. I understood now that my parents had not made a desperate mistake. They had made a deliberate choice to sacrifice my future for their convenience. The way they had spoken to me, expecting gratitude for their betrayal, told me everything I needed to know about who they really were. I called in sick to work and spent the day researching identity theft laws in Ohio. What I discovered made my situation even more infuriating. Since the loan had been taken out when I was 17, it constituted identity theft of a minor, which carried more serious criminal penalties. My parents had not just stolen from me, they had committed a felony that could result in significant jail time and financial penalties. I also learned that the statute of limitations for this type of fraud was 7 years from when I discovered the crime, not from when it occurred. This meant I had plenty of time to build a case, but it also meant my parents could continue damaging my credit and my life if I did not act quickly. My first stop was the police station downtown. Officer Maria Santos, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, took my statement with professional sympathy. She had clearly seen cases like mine before. "Unfortunately, family identity theft is more common than people think," she told me as she typed up my report. "Adult children often discover that parents have been using their credit for years. The hard part is that many victims are reluctant to press charges against family members." "I want to press charges," I said without hesitation. They stole $45,000 and destroyed my credit. The fact that they are related to me does not give them the right to ruin my life. Officer Santos nodded approvingly. Good for you. Too many people let family get away with financial abuse because of misplaced loyalty. You will need to dispute the debt with the credit bureaus and provide them with a copy of this police report. The investigation will take some time, but you are doing the right thing. Next, I visited a consumer protection attorney named David Chen, who specialized in identity theft cases. His consultation fee was $200. I could barely afford, but I needed professional guidance on protecting myself legally. Your case is particularly strong because you were a minor when the fraud occurred, he explained after reviewing my documentation. However, you need to understand that pursuing this criminally against your parents will likely destroy your relationship with them permanently. Are you prepared for that outcome? I thought about the conversation with my parents the night before, their casual expectation that I should be grateful for their betrayal. My relationship with them is already destroyed, I said. They just do not know it yet. David helped me understand the process ahead. I would need to file disputes with all 3 credit bureaus, provide affidavits stating I had never authorized the loan, and cooperate with any investigation the lending institution conducted. He also recommended I freeze my credit immediately to prevent any additional fraudulent accounts from being opened. That afternoon, I drove to my parents' house for what I knew would be our final conversation as a family. I found them both in the living room, watching television as if nothing had happened. The casual normalcy of the scene made my stomach turn. Serena. Mom smiled brightly when I walked in. We were hoping you would come by. Your father and I talked last night, and we think we can work out a payment plan that works for everyone. Maybe you could take over the loan payments, and we could help you out with a little money here and there when things improve for us. The audacity of their proposal left me speechless for a moment. They wanted me to take over payments on money they had stolen, while they occasionally threw me scraps when convenient for them. I filed a police report this morning, I said calmly. I also hired a lawyer and disputed the debt with the credit bureaus. You committed identity theft, which is a felony, and I intend to make sure you face the legal consequences. Dad's face turned red immediately. Serena, you cannot be serious. We are your parents. Everything we did was for this family. Everything you did was for yourselves, I corrected. You stole from your own daughter and destroyed my financial future because it was easier than being responsible adults. Then you had the nerve to suggest I should be grateful. Mom started crying, but her tears felt manipulative rather than genuine. How can you do this to us? We raised you, we loved you, we sacrificed everything for your education. This is how you repay us? You want to talk about repayment? I stood up, feeling more powerful than I had ever felt in my life. Let me tell you what you owe me. You owe me 4 years of perfect credit I will never get back. You owe me the house I cannot buy because of what you did. You owe me the trust you violated and the security you stole. But most of all, you owe me an apology that I know I will never receive because you still think you are the victims here. If you go through with this, you will tear this family apart, Dad said, his voice heavy with threat and manipulation. You already did that the day you decided to forge my signature, I replied. I am just making sure there are consequences. As I walked toward the door, Mom called after me with desperation in her voice. Serena, please. Think about your brother. Think about what this will do to Kevin. I paused at the doorway. Kevin was 23, just graduated from college, and still living at home while he looked for work. He had always been the golden child, the one who never questioned our parents' decisions. Part of me wondered if they had used his identity too, but I pushed that thought away. I could only handle my own betrayal right now. Kevin will have to make his own decisions about what kind of relationship he wants with people who steal from their own children, I said. But I am done pretending that blood makes what you did acceptable. I left my childhood home for the last time that day, knowing I would never return as their daughter. The woman who walked out was someone new entirely, someone who understood that real family is not about shared DNA, but about mutual respect, trust, and genuine love. My parents had proven they were incapable of all three. Over the next several weeks, I threw myself into building an ironclad case against my parents with the methodical precision of someone who had finally found purpose in seeking justice. Every morning before work, I spent hours on the phone with credit bureaus, banks, and investigators. Every evening, I documented conversations, gathered evidence, and researched legal precedents for identity theft cases involving family members. The process was emotionally exhausting but also oddly therapeutic. Each form I filled out, each affidavit I signed, felt like I was reclaiming pieces of myself that my parents had stolen. I was no longer the naive daughter who trusted blindly. I was becoming someone who demanded accountability and refused to accept manipulation disguised as love. My breakthrough came 3 weeks into the investigation when Detective James Morrison, who had been assigned to my case, called with unexpected news. "Miss Walsh, we have been investigating the financial institution that issued the loan in your name. It turns out your case is not isolated. We have identified at least 6 other instances where loans were approved with questionable documentation during the same time period by the same loan officer." This revelation opened up an entirely new dimension to my case. Not only had my parents committed identity theft, but they had likely worked with a corrupt loan officer who had a pattern of approving fraudulent applications. Detective Morrison explained that this made my case part of a larger federal investigation into loan fraud, which meant I would have additional resources and legal support. "We would like you to consider working with us in a more extensive capacity," Detective Morrison continued. "Your willingness to press charges against family members demonstrates a level of commitment to justice that could help us build cases against other perpetrators. Would you be willing to testify in court if this goes to trial?" "Absolutely," I replied without hesitation. "I want everyone involved in this fraud to face consequences." Around this same time, I received an unexpected phone call that would prove to be crucial in the months ahead. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar but warm, introducing herself as Patricia Chen, David's sister and a forensic accountant who specialized in financial fraud cases. "David mentioned your case to me, and I think I might be able to help you beyond just the legal aspects," Patricia explained. "I run a support network for victims of family financial abuse. We help people navigate the emotional and practical challenges of seeking justice against relatives who have stolen from them. Would you be interested in joining one of our support groups?" I had never considered that there might be other people dealing with similar betrayals. The idea that family financial abuse was common enough to warrant support groups was both comforting and horrifying. Patricia invited me to attend a meeting the following Tuesday evening at a community center downtown. Walking into that support group meeting was like stepping into a parallel universe where my experience was not only understood but validated by people who had lived through similar betrayals. There were 8 of us that night, ranging in age from 22 to 54, and every person had a story about family members who had stolen their identities, drained their accounts, or destroyed their credit for personal gain. Marcus, a 30-year-old teacher, told us about discovering that his mother had been using his social security number to open utility accounts for over a decade. Sarah, a recent college graduate, learned that her father had taken out multiple credit cards in her name to fund his gambling addiction. Jennifer, a woman in her 40s, discovered that her siblings had been using their deceased mother's identity to take out loans, forging her signature as the executor of the estate. But the story that resonated most deeply was told by Daniel, a quiet man in his early 30s who bore an unsettling resemblance to my brother Kevin. His parents had used his identity to secure a business loan when he was 19, then demanded he take over payments when their business failed. When he refused and threatened legal action, they turned his entire extended family against him, claiming he was selfish and ungrateful. "The hardest part is not the financial damage," Daniel explained to the group. "It is realizing that the people who raised you to value honesty and integrity never applied those values to their relationship with you. They see you as a resource to be exploited, not a person to be respected." His words articulated something I had been struggling to express about my own situation. My parents had taught me to be honest, responsible, and trustworthy, but they had never extended those same courtesies to me. Their love had always been conditional on my usefulness to them. Patricia facilitated the group with professional skill and personal understanding. She had gone through her own family financial betrayal 15 years earlier when her ex-husband and his family had systematically drained her business accounts and retirement savings during their divorce proceedings. Recovery from family financial abuse involves both practical and emotional healing, she explained. You have to rebuild your financial life, but you also have to rebuild your understanding of trust, family, and self-worth. The people in this room understand that journey in ways that even well-meaning friends and therapists sometimes cannot. Over the following weeks, the support group became my lifeline. These people understood the unique pain of being betrayed by family members who continued to act as though they were victims of my unreasonable expectations. They celebrated with me when the credit bureaus accepted my disputes and began removing the fraudulent debt from my reports. They supported me when my extended family started calling to tell me I was destroying the family over money. One particularly difficult evening, I received a call from my Aunt Carol, my mother's sister, who had always been like a second mother to me. She had heard about the legal action through family gossip and was calling to convince me to drop the charges. "Serena, honey, I understand you are hurt, but your parents are good people who made a mistake," she said with the kind of patronizing tone that implied I was being childish and vindictive. Families work through problems together. They do not drag each other into court. "Aunt Carol," I replied, my voice steady despite my racing heart, "if someone who was not related to me had stolen $45,000 and destroyed my credit, would you tell me to forgive them and work it out privately?" "That is different," she protested. "These are your parents." "No," I said firmly, "it is exactly the same. Being related to someone does not give them permission to commit crimes against you. If anything, it makes the betrayal worse because they violated a sacred trust." Carol continued trying to guilt me into dropping the charges, using every manipulation tactic I had learned to recognize through the support group. She reminded me of family holidays, childhood memories, and all the sacrifices my parents had made. She painted me as vindictive and ungrateful, suggesting that I was choosing money over family. "I am not choosing money over family," I told her before ending the call. "I am choosing accountability over enabling. There is a difference." That conversation crystallized something important for me. My extended family's reaction showed me that the dysfunction in my family system went far deeper than just my parents' financial crimes. There was an entire network of people who were invested in maintaining the status quo, even when that status quo included criminal behavior. After sharing this experience with my support group, Patricia suggested I consider going public with my story. "Your case is particularly compelling because it involves family members who are still trying to manipulate you into protecting them from consequences," she explained. "Your voice could help other victims understand that they have options beyond suffering in silence." The idea terrified me, but it also felt empowering. For too long, my parents had controlled the narrative about our family. They had trained me to keep their secrets, to protect their image, to prioritize their comfort over my own well-being. Going public would be the ultimate rejection of their control over my story. As I sat in my apartment that night, looking at the pile of legal documents that represented my fight for justice, I realized I was no longer just seeking personal vindication. I was becoming part of something larger. A movement of people who refused to let family ties excuse criminal behavior. The scared, confused young woman who had walked into that bank 3 months earlier was gone. In her place was someone who understood that real love never requires you to sacrifice your dignity, your future, or your sense of justice. By December, 6 months after discovering the fraud, I had transformed from a victim into a strategic force for justice. The investigation had expanded beyond my individual case into a comprehensive federal probe of the lending institution and the corrupt loan officer who had facilitated dozens of fraudulent loans. Detective Morrison kept me updated on the progress, and the evidence they had gathered was overwhelming. My parents, meanwhile, had escalated their manipulation campaign. They enlisted every family member, family friend, and church acquaintance to pressure me into dropping the charges. The messages I received ranged from tearful pleas to angry accusations, but they all carried the same underlying message: I was destroying the family by refusing to enable their criminal behavior. The turning point came when my brother Kevin finally called me directly. I had not spoken to him since filing the police report, and hearing his voice brought back a flood of complicated emotions. Kevin and I had been close growing up, despite our 4-year age difference, and part of me had hoped he would understand why I had to seek justice. "Serena, you need to stop this insanity," he said without any greeting or pleasantries. "Mom and Dad are falling apart. Dad cannot find work because potential employers are finding out about the criminal charges, and Mom is having panic attacks every day. You are destroying their lives over money." "I am holding them accountable for destroying my life with their crimes," I corrected him. "Kevin, they stole $45,000 from me and ruined my credit. How is that acceptable to you?" "They made a mistake," he shouted. "People make mistakes. But you are being vindictive and cruel. This is not the sister I grew up with." His words stung because part of me agreed with him. The sister he grew up with would have absorbed the betrayal silently, prioritized family peace over personal justice, and found a way to forgive the unforgivable. But that sister had been trained to accept unacceptable behavior, and I refused to be her anymore. "Kevin, I need to ask you something important," I said, my voice gentle but serious. "Have you ever checked your credit report? Have you ever looked to see if there are accounts in your name that you did not open?" The silence that followed my question told me everything I needed to know. After a long pause, Kevin's voice returned, smaller and less certain than before. "What are you talking about?" "I think you should pull your credit report," I said carefully. "I think you might discover that I am not the only victim in this family." That conversation ended abruptly when Kevin hung up on me, but I knew I had planted a seed that would grow. 3 days later, he called me back, and his voice was completely different: shaky, confused, and betrayed. "Serena," he whispered, "there are 2 credit cards in my name that I never opened. The balances are over $8,000 combined, and they have been maxed out for months. I never knew they existed." My heart broke for him, but I also felt a grim satisfaction that the truth was finally coming to light. Our parents had not just stolen from me. They had systematically exploited both of their children, treating us like financial resources rather than human beings deserving of respect and honesty. "What do I do?" Kevin asked, sounding lost and young despite being 23 years old. "You file a police report," I said gently. "You dispute the charges with the credit bureaus. You join me in holding them accountable for what they did to both of us." "But they are our parents," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Parents do not steal from their children," I replied. "Whatever they are not functioning as parents. They are functioning as criminals who happen to share our DNA." Kevin's decision to file his own police report was the final piece of evidence that transformed our individual cases into a compelling pattern of criminal behavior. Detective Morrison was thrilled with this development because it demonstrated that my parents had engaged in systematic identity theft, not just a one-time desperate mistake as their lawyer had been arguing. The media attention began shortly after Kevin filed his report. Patricia had helped me connect with investigative journalist Rachel Kim, who specialized in financial crimes involving family members. Rachel had been following the federal investigation into the lending institution and was interested in featuring our story as part of a larger piece about family financial abuse. The article, titled "When Family Becomes the Enemy, Adult Children Fight Back Against Financial Abuse," was published in a major online publication and immediately went viral. Rachel had done an excellent job of presenting our story within the broader context of family financial abuse, including statistics about how common these crimes were and how rarely they were prosecuted. The response to the article was overwhelming. My email inbox flooded with messages from other victims of family financial abuse, many of whom had never spoken about their experiences before. Some shared stories that made my situation look minor in comparison. Parents who had stolen entire inheritances, siblings who had drained business accounts, family members who had committed tax fraud using relatives' information. But the most meaningful responses came from other victims who said that reading our story had given them the courage to seek justice in their own situations. A woman in California filed charges against her mother after reading about Kevin and me. A man in Texas finally reported his brother for credit card fraud. Our willingness to go public had created a ripple effect of accountability that extended far beyond our individual case. My parents' response to the media attention was predictably manipulative. They reached out to the same journalist to tell their side of the story, painting themselves as loving parents who had made desperate financial decisions during difficult times. They claimed that Kevin and I were vindictive children who were destroying the family over misunderstandings that could have been resolved privately. But their narrative fell apart under scrutiny. Rachel had done her research and discovered that my parents had a pattern of financial irresponsibility dating back decades. They had filed for bankruptcy twice, defaulted on multiple loans, and had a history of using other people's credit to solve their financial problems. Kevin and I were not their first victims, we were just their most accessible ones. The article also revealed that the corrupt loan officer who had facilitated our parents' crimes had been arrested and was cooperating with federal investigators in exchange for a reduced sentence. His testimony provided detailed information about how the fraudulent loan scheme operated and implicated several other individuals in the conspiracy. As winter turned to spring, I watched my parents' carefully constructed victim narrative crumble under the weight of evidence and public scrutiny. The community that had once pressured me to forgive them began to distance themselves as the full scope of their criminal behavior became clear. Even some family members who had initially supported them started reaching out to apologize for not understanding the severity of what had happened. I felt no satisfaction in their public humiliation, but I felt deep pride in my decision to demand justice. Every news story, every court filing, every piece of evidence that emerged validated my choice to reject their manipulation and hold them accountable for their crimes. The trial began in early June, almost exactly 1 year after I had first discovered the fraud. The federal courthouse was an imposing building that seemed designed to remind everyone present of the serious nature of justice, and walking through its doors felt like crossing a threshold from which there would be no return. My parents sat at the defendant's table with their attorney, a tired-looking public defender who had been assigned their case after they could no longer afford private representation. The months of legal fees, lost income from Dad's inability to find work, and the stress of pending criminal charges had taken a visible toll on both of them. Mom had lost significant weight and looked frail in her conservative court outfit. Dad's face was gray with exhaustion and what I hoped was genuine remorse. Kevin sat in the gallery behind me, his presence both comforting and heartbreaking. The discovery of the fraudulent credit cards in his name had shattered his illusions about our parents just as thoroughly as the loan had destroyed mine. He had initially struggled with the decision to testify against them, but the support group Patricia had connected him with helped him understand that accountability was not the same as revenge. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. They presented a clear timeline of the fraud, complete with forged documents, bank records, and testimony from the corrupt loan officer who had facilitated the crimes. The evidence showed that my parents had not made desperate decisions during a financial crisis, they had made calculated choices to exploit their children's identities for personal benefit. Assistant Diana Reyes, the federal prosecutor handling the case, was a woman in her 40s with the kind of calm competence that inspired confidence. She presented our case as part of a broader pattern of financial fraud that had victimized multiple families, but she made sure the jury understood the personal betrayal that Kevin and I had experienced. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she said during her opening statement, "this case is about more than financial fraud. It is about parents who violated the most fundamental trust that exists between family members. These defendants did not just steal money, they stole their children's futures and then demanded gratitude for the theft. When I took the stand to testify, I felt a strange sense of calm. For months, I had been preparing for this moment, working with Patricia and the support group to process my emotions and organize my thoughts. I was no longer the confused young woman who had discovered the fraud. I was someone who understood exactly what had happened and why it was wrong. The defense attorney tried to portray me as vindictive and ungrateful during cross-examination, suggesting that I was destroying my family over money that my parents had intended to pay back. But I had learned to recognize manipulation tactics, and his questions only reinforced how justified my actions had been. "Miss Walsh," he asked with practiced sympathy, "do you not think your parents deserve some consideration for the sacrifices they made to put you through college?" "I think parents who sacrifice for their children do so out of love, not to create debt that their children will owe them later," I replied calmly. Real sacrifices do not require the recipient to be grateful for having their identity stolen and their future destroyed. Kevin's testimony was even more powerful than mine because it demonstrated that our parents' crimes were not isolated incidents but part of a pattern of treating their children as financial resources. When the defense attorney suggested that Kevin was only testifying because I had pressured him, Kevin's response was firm and clear. "My sister gave me the courage to seek justice," he said, looking directly at our parents as he spoke. "But she did not pressure me to do anything. She simply showed me that family love should not require accepting criminal behavior." The defense tried to present character witnesses who testified about my parents' good deeds and community involvement, but their testimony felt hollow against the overwhelming evidence of financial fraud. Several witnesses admitted under cross-examination that they had not known about the identity theft charges when they agreed to testify. The most damaging testimony came from the forensic accountant who had analyzed my parents' financial records. She revealed that my parents had been living beyond their means for years, using credit cards and loans to maintain a lifestyle they could not afford. The loan taken out in my name had not been used for emergency expenses as they claimed. It had been used to pay off existing debts and fund discretionary spending, including a vacation and new furniture. The defendants exhibited a pattern of financial irresponsibility spanning more than a decade, the accountant testified. The fraud committed against their children was not an act of desperation, it was a continuation of their established pattern of using other people's money to solve their financial problems. When the guilty verdict was read, I felt an overwhelming mix of relief, sadness, and vindication. My parents were convicted on multiple federal charges including identity theft, wire fraud, and conspiracy. Kevin and I had been vindicated in the most public way possible, but there was no joy in watching our parents led away in handcuffs. The sentencing hearing took place 6 weeks later. My parents each received 3 years in federal prison followed by 5 years of supervised probation. They were also ordered to pay full restitution to Kevin and me, though we both understood that they would likely never have the means to do so. Before sentencing, the judge allowed victim impact statements. I had spent weeks writing mine, trying to articulate the full scope of damage that went far beyond financial harm. "Your Honor," I said, standing at the podium in the courtroom where my childhood had officially ended, "the defendants did not just steal money from my brother and me. They stole our ability to trust, our sense of security, and our belief that family means protection rather than exploitation. They taught us that love is conditional on usefulness and that blood relations justify criminal behavior. The financial damage can be repaired over time, but the emotional damage will take years of therapy and personal growth to overcome." Kevin's statement was shorter but equally powerful. He spoke about the confusion of loving people who had betrayed him so fundamentally and the difficulty of rebuilding his understanding of family and trust. My parents were given the opportunity to make statements before sentencing, and their words revealed that they still did not fully understand what they had done wrong. They apologized for causing us pain, but they continued to frame their crimes as mistakes made out of love rather than deliberate acts of exploitation. As I walked out of the courthouse that day, I realized that the legal proceedings were ending, but my real journey was just beginning. Justice had been served in the traditional sense, But I still had to figure out how to build a life and a sense of family that was not based on the toxic dynamics I had grown up with. 2 years have passed since the trial ended, and I can honestly say that seeking justice against my parents was the best decision I ever made, even though it was also the hardest. The woman writing this story today bears little resemblance to the confused young person who discovered that devastating loan on her credit report. I have learned that sometimes destroying toxic family systems is the only way to create space for healthy relationships to grow. The practical aspects of recovery took time but proved manageable with proper support. The fraudulent debt was completely removed from my credit report within 18 months, and my credit score recovered to excellent status. I was able to buy a modest condo in a quiet neighborhood outside Portland, and the feeling of signing my own mortgage papers with my own good credit was better than any victory I could have imagined. Kevin and I have grown closer than we ever were as children, bonded by our shared experience of betrayal and recovery. He moved to Portland 6 months after the trial and lives just 20 minutes away from me. We have learned to be family to each other in ways our parents never taught us, with honesty, respect, and genuine care for each other's well-being. We check in regularly, celebrate each other's successes, and provide support during difficult times without keeping score or expecting payback. The support group Patricia introduced me to became a second family that understood my journey in ways that even well-meaning friends could not. Several of us have remained close even after completing the formal group sessions. Marcus, the teacher whose mother had used his social security number for utilities, became one of my closest friends. We often joke that we are building the families we deserved to have from the beginning, choosing people who demonstrate love through actions rather than demanding it through manipulation. My relationship with Marcus, my boyfriend, deepened significantly through this experience. He witnessed my transformation from someone who accepted unacceptable behavior to someone who demanded accountability, and his unwavering support showed me what healthy love actually looks like. He never pressured me to forgive my parents or suggested that family reconciliation should be my goal. Instead, he consistently validated my right to prioritize my own well-being and supported my decisions even when they were difficult. We got engaged last spring in a small ceremony surrounded by our chosen family, the friends who had become our real relatives through mutual respect and genuine care. Planning our wedding has been an exercise in creating traditions that reflect our values rather than obligations to people who had forfeited their right to participate in our lives. The extended family situation resolved itself naturally over time. Some relatives continued to pressure us to reconcile with our parents, but most eventually accepted that we had made permanent decisions based on serious criminal behavior. A few family members, including my Aunt Carol, eventually apologized for their initial reactions and admitted they had not understood the severity of what our parents had done. My parents were released from federal prison 8 months ago after serving their full sentences. They moved to a small apartment across the state and have made no direct attempts to contact Kevin or me. Occasionally, we hear updates through mutual acquaintances, but we have maintained firm boundaries about not engaging with them or anyone who tries to facilitate contact. I have no interest in reconciliation, and I have made peace with that decision. Forgiveness, I have learned, does not require maintaining relationships with people who have proven themselves untrustworthy. I have forgiven my parents in the sense that I no longer carry anger or resentment about what they did, but I will never again allow them access to my life or my well-being. The media attention from our story led to unexpected opportunities to help other families dealing with similar situations. I have testified before state legislative committees about the need for stronger laws protecting victims of family financial abuse. Patricia and I co-authored an article for a legal journal about the unique challenges of prosecuting identity theft cases involving family members. Most meaningfully, I volunteer with an organization that provides support and resources to victims of family financial abuse. Every month, I meet with people who are struggling with the same impossible choice between family loyalty and personal justice that I once faced. I tell them what I wish someone had told me. That real family does not require you to sacrifice your dignity, your future, or your sense of right and wrong. The financial restitution ordered by the court will likely never be paid in full, and I have made peace with that reality. The money was never really the point anyway. What mattered was refusing to accept that family relationships justify criminal behavior and demanding that people who commit crimes face appropriate consequences regardless of their DNA relationship to their victims. I have also learned to recognize and appreciate the family I have chosen and built around me. Marcus and I are planning our wedding for next summer, surrounded by people who have proven their love through consistent support and respect. Kevin will walk me down the aisle, and Patricia will officiate the ceremony. My chosen family includes support group members who became genuine friends, colleagues who supported me through the legal process, and neighbors who became confidants. Sometimes people ask me if I regret my decision to pursue criminal charges against my parents, and the answer is always an emphatic no. The legal process was difficult and emotionally draining, but it taught me that I am capable of protecting myself and demanding accountability from people who wrong me. It showed me that I do not have to accept unacceptable behavior from anyone, regardless of their relationship to me. More importantly, it demonstrated that there are people in the world who will support justice even when it is difficult, who will stand by you when you make hard choices, and who will help you build something better from the wreckage of toxic relationships. These people became my real family, and their love is not conditional on my willingness to enable bad behavior or accept mistreatment. The scared young woman who discovered that loan on her credit report 3 years ago could never have imagined the strength, peace, and genuine happiness that would come from choosing accountability over enabling. She could not have pictured the loving relationships that would grow from the soil of that destroyed toxic family system. As I finish writing this story, I am sitting in my own home, surrounded by photos of my chosen family and planning a future with someone who loves me in healthy, respectful ways. The journey from betrayal to justice to healing has been long and sometimes lonely, but it led me to a life that is authentically mine, built on foundations of mutual respect rather than familial obligation. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what you know is right? Sometimes the people who share our DNA are not the ones who truly love us, and sometimes real family is found among people who choose to support us rather than exploit us. Drop a comment below sharing your thoughts about family accountability and chosen family. Your story might help someone else who is struggling with similar decisions. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more real stories about overcoming family drama and building healthier relationships. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that they have the right to demand respect from family members just like they would from anyone else. Thank you for listening to my journey from betrayal to justice, and remember that choosing accountability over enabling is always the path to genuine healing and authentic relationships. Sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself and future generations is to break toxic family cycles, no matter how difficult that choice might be.